Hey, just a few words about the Oscars, the Academy Awards. This is something I've commented on before on the sort of identity politics and questions around diversity and so on that have been prominent in recent years. But I guess I just want to sort of look at this in a summarized way, or rather, how the Oscars comes across nowadays. In terms of viewership, unless I'm mistaken, the total number of ratings for the Oscars has dropped. I believe it peaked sort of in the late 90s, when Titanic won in it would have been the 1998 ceremony. Um, whether that's telling of the way things are at the moment in terms of how the wider public perceive the Oscars, I don't know. Um, what I've noticed is that there's kind of two schools of thought here. There's two polarizing schools of thought, or two, I should say, very different schools of thought. One is to be totally on board with the message, and it's all woke and it's great. And there are some people of my generation, some millennials, who fully endorse that sort of narrative. So, in other words, it has to pitch to feminism, it has to pitch to diversity, it has to pitch to LGBT friendly, etc. And before I'm misunderstood, I'm not saying there's anything fundamentally wrong with those things. I'm really, really not. But it's absolutely become apparently domineering feature of how the Oscars is. I mean, it's become like this for this sake rather than just for art's sake. So that's one side. The other side is kind of conservative backlash. Oh, well, the Oscars, Hollywood, it's just a bunch of liberal elites getting together. I heard someone actually describe this as basically the Oscars is multimillionaires getting together to congratulate and award other multimillionaires for going to work every day so that they can lecture the rest of the world on how the world should be. Yeah, and it's sort of, there is some truth in that. Um, Having said that, I wouldn't mitigate acting as a profession, particularly at the top level. I think it is very challenging. I mean, okay, you could look at these people, they have very comfortable lives, they are very rich, they have all the comforts that come with that, and apparently they get a $225,000 package with being nominees. Now, that is a lot of money, you know, more than many people will see in a lifetime. And that is just their kind of bonus for being nominees. Um, so it goes without question that these people have comfortable lifestyles. But that doesn't mean that acting's easy, and it doesn't mean that they don't work hard. Uh, I don't agree with those who say, "Oh, it's easy," or they just get it for nothing. I think the best actors, they do work hard. Rehearsal after rehearsal, sometimes physically challenging. It's not challenging in the way, for example, a soldier on the front line is facing life and death. It's not challenging in the way that the emergency services face, or a doctor working or nurse working around the clock in difficult circumstances. It's not challenging the way that countless unnamed people around this world have challenging day-to-day lives. But it is challenging insofar as the pressures of fame, insofar as the paparazzi intrusion, particularly in the state of California. So I don't think it's easy and it isn't. It's easy insofar as they have luxurious lives, glamorous lives, but I don't think people can really say that it's an easy profession if they haven't done it. So that's not my position. I would never say, oh, it's easy what they do. But I do take a pretty dim view of people who complain about their lifestyle when they have so many perks. I'm not talking about some of the behavior of the press. I think the paparazzi are despicable, and I think Californian law needs to strengthen on that. But What I'm talking about is people who, and I'm going to be politically incorrect here, but when I hear certain minority actors complain about how hard life is for them, when they're getting massive salaries, I don't take very kindly to that because there are people all over the world struggling, white, black, Asian, particularly in developing countries, and for them to sort of say, oh, well, I'm a black actor or I'm an Asian actor, woe is me, spare me, really, spare me. The fact that you've become a nominee or the fact that you've even got to that level in Hollywood, don't complain. Just don't, because there are many actors that overall are overlooked. There's times when the Academy Award has got it wrong, and there's been controversial winners, and there's times they've got it right. I feel that they've made the right decision. But here's the thing with the Oscars. I'm talking about the ceremony because actually I don't agree with those who say that Hollywood's dead now. All films are rubbish, and that's why everyone's going to Netflix. Firstly, I hope that doesn't happen. I still love film as a medium. I love Hollywood as as the traditional concept that it is, the world center of motion picture entertainment. Bollywood technically produces more films, but let's face it, Hollywood is still Hollywood, right? And I must admit, I love that side of it. I love the romance of it, the appeal of it. I think La La Land, I think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I think the Golden Era, all that stuff. I think it's still there. And long may it continue. It's a massive part of human culture. Okay. But with that, the way that the Oscars have become in recent years has just become so predictable. I'm not talking necessarily about the awards, I'm talking about the overlapping politics with it. Every single ceremony, every year, it doesn't matter who is nominated. It doesn't matter that this year an Asian film with an Asian director won Best Picture and Best Director. There is still the pontificating about diversity. And it's almost like there has to be an exact checklist. And if it doesn't meet that, then we're going to protest and we're going to make our political speeches. And I reckon any actor that doesn't endorse this mentality, any actor, director, producer, choreographer who thinks outside the box and says, well, how about let's just have art for art's sake and meritocracy and just award the best performers, the best artists. Anyone who thinks that way, I honestly think they're going to be kind of polarized and not quite blacklisted, but I actually think it's the contemporary equivalent to what was going on in Hollywood in the 50s, where you did have left leaning people who were blacklisted, often unfairly, as alleged communists. The late Kirk Douglas famously had Dalton Trumbo involved in Spartacus and credited as well. So fair play to him. I think actually today we're seeing now this phenomenon that unless you're woke, then you're thinking outside the box and you must be dangerous. You must be different. I think when it comes to diversity, of course, if it was only like if it was white only, that would be an issue. I totally understand that. But the problem I have with the current trajectory is it seems to be give me an award because I'm black, give me an award because I'm gay, give me an award because I'm a woman. It may well be that there are certain areas where there is a lack of representation. So, for example, maybe women directors are overlooked. Maybe that is a legitimate concern. But if the argument is make Hollywood look like wider America, the demographics of the United States, unless I'm mistaken, and it does vary state by state, but overall, the United States is still a majority white Caucasian country. Now, that's not a statement of supremacy, it's just a fact. It will be different in states like Texas and California, but um, the point there is actually, if you look at the nominees, if you look at the record in recent years, the actual nominees, winners probably roughly represent wider society. So to say that it's not representative, I think, is probably a flawed claim. But that won't matter because it doesn't fit into the narrative of victimhood. Um, and I think it's really unfortunate because it's teaching young ethnic minority actors who are getting into the industry, if you don't get rewarded for your work, it's because of racism. It's because you're black, it's because you're Asian, because you're Hispanic. Um, it may, they won't be told, well, maybe it's just because you're not the best on this particular occasion. You've worked hard, but you just not the best on this occasion. The academy felt that someone else was more deserving. I think it's very unfortunate. I think it's causing unnecessary divisions. I mean, when someone like Will Smith complains about a lack of diversity, I'm thinking, spare me. I think Smith's a good actor, but he's clearly benefited from Hollywood, as have a lot of other minority people. So to suggest that it's this white establishment, I think is misleading. That was certainly the case in the past. I can accept that. But I really think that improvements have been made in recent years. So the fact that this argument is still going on and on and on makes me think that the diversity issue has hijacked art for art's sake. And if you even have this opinion, you're immediately denounced as some fascist. So there is definitely an element of groupthink. Um, I totally agree that Hollywood needs to move with the times, but not to the point of making the overriding politics so blatantly obvious that it's actually just putting people off. I mean, if the number of people who watch the Oscars has greatly declined, I would not at all be surprised if this is a reason. There may be different factors for that, but I think the average person watching the Oscars, they want to see their favorite actors getting awards, they want to see the entertainment side of it. I think most people don't want to be lectured. There may be some exceptions. There may be some people that say, "Oh, well, this actor is making a good point about that subject," or and they may respect that. My take is where an issue directly relates to a film. Like, for example, if you have a film about the civil rights movement, it makes sense for the actor getting the award or the director to make comments about that. Okay, that's related to the film. But Joaquin Phoenix talking about veganism when he's getting an award for being the Joker, that just seems to me like, okay, Joaquin, just get into politics or something. Um, I think I think it makes the wider public think it's kind of this elite club, and it's just patronizing. People don't like to feel that they're being patronized by multimillionaires, and I have to say I do find it quite galling. Lawrence Fox made this point, and he was absolutely lambasted for speaking out. But he made the point that it's interesting that certain minority actors only seem to speak out about racism when they've actually done well. So clearly there's a contradiction there. If they have done well by the industry, they've done well by the industry. And I don't doubt that they've had to struggle, but acting in general is a struggle. I mean, if we look at some of the themes that have been taken on by film in recent years, look at the number of films that are addressing black issues. Selma, 12 Years a Slave, Harriet, um, Django Unchained. This goes on. Detroit, there is a lot of them, and that's fine. I personally think some of them have been pretty powerful films. I've been moved by them, but to say that minority issues are being ignored, or I would say it's quite the opposite. It's become the defining thing. If you had a script, a screenplay that was not featuring diversity in some way, it would get thrown out, even if that screenplay was relating to a context of time where you would have had less diversity. I mean, you're now getting period films, British period films, where they have to have a token minority person. And by the way, I don't blame those actors. They take the jobs that they can get. I don't blame them personally, but I think Lawrence Fox is onto something. It is diversity for the sake of it, not because it's realistic, not because it's equal, but just for the sake of it, just to look good, just to virtue signal. Um, and I think that's unfortunate because it's it's just hijacking the whole industry. It's just become. I mean, you watch the Oscars, and I don't, but I've watched clips of it, so I've seen enough to know what the trajectory is, and it's just predictable. It's just going to be bashing Trump, and okay, maybe deserves bashing. I don't like Trump much, but it's just become predictable, and that's a pity because this is the one ceremony that is meant to be sort of symbolic of rewarding art and celebrating art. Um, and it's just become so predictable. And I do find it's overshadowing the entertainment factor because you can no longer, I mean, where's the fun in the Oscars? It's all about moral lectures and it's all about white shaming and male shaming. It's just so bloody predictable. Um, and like I say, anyone who thinks outside the box, I mean, my goodness, if let's say for the sake of argument, I was an actor or a producer or a director, simply for saying the things I've said in this video, I would almost certainly be cast out and shunned. What a terrible person. How dare Nathan Hazlett say those things? All I'm saying is genuine equality needs to be treating people just as people. This obsession that Hollywood has with identity politics, like a black actor, a black actress, how about just they're an actor? Okay? It just becomes an obsession. And all it does, in my opinion, is create animosity and division. I mean, my goodness, Martin Luther King was speaking 50 years ago. I wonder if he was still alive, what he would think of the current situation. Would he endorse it? I don't know. I'm not sure that he would. I'm not sure that he would endorse the obsession with identity politics. I think his vision was of a future where people were colorblind. This trajectory of how many black actors have been nominated versus how many white actors have been nominated. How about just saying, look, this guy's been nominated because we recognize he's a good actor. I can think of plenty of minority actors who do deserve recognition and sometimes have been overlooked. But there have also been white actors who've been overlooked. But because they're the majority, there's not that kind of, oh, well, it must be racist. And by the way, I'm not saying that there has never been a racial aspect in Hollywood, that there's never been racism. Of course there has in the past. Absolutely. I don't deny that. What I'm saying is that it is much, much less of an issue today. But it's no longer become about equality, it's become about diversity for the sake of it. Not for fairness, not for, well, this represents wider America. It's become, unless there is this many, say for example, you have four Best Actor nominees, unless one of them is black or Asian, oh, well, then it must be racist. And that sort of thinking, I think, is ridiculous. Just because one ceremony doesn't have a Best Actor or Best Actress who is a minority person doesn't mean that the whole thing is racist. And it's what I find problematic about the diversity issue in general. You see this in government, you see this in companies. By all means, if there is clear evidence that someone is actually being held back because they're black, because they're Asian, i.e., there is credible evidence to say this person is not getting a particular role because they're black or Asian or Hispanic, that's wrong. Outside the context of historic films, clearly you can't have a black actor playing Abraham Lincoln any more than you can have a white actor playing Nelson Mandela. It's just common sense because audience wouldn't buy it. Audience would say this is so obviously trying to make a statement and not a very good one. So that's my concern about Hollywood. I still love the film industry. I think it would be hypocritical for me to say, oh, Hollywood's. I mean, John Cusack actually dismissed it as a whorehouse. I wouldn't go that far, not being an insider. I think probably there is a lot of. I think there's probably plenty of corruption there. I think there's probably a lot of backstabbing. I think it'd be quite a cruel place. I think you need very, very tough skin to be any actor in Hollywood, or producer or director. Um, I think it's probably a very superficial place in some ways. Nevertheless, it is what it is. It's still entertained the world for decades. I'd be a hypocrite. I'm a film lover. I would be a hypocrite if I say I hate Hollywood. So for me, Hollywood is bigger than this. It has to be. I hope this is something that will kind of phase out over time in the next decade and onwards, whereby it's just about meritocracy. There should be diversity, but it shouldn't be for box ticking. It shouldn't be because if there's not nominees from minority groups, then oh, it's racist. It should be meritocracy and meritocracy alone. But you try arguing that. My concern about Hollywood is the intolerance, the groupthink that is going on there. Anyone in the business who is either conservative or a bit to the right or centrist, moderate, if they don't agree with some of the narrative that's being said these days, I think they'd struggle to get work. I really do. Because there is a group think, and frankly, it is liberal elite. In point of glossing that over, that's what it is. Now, I don't begrudge an actor being rich if they've worked hard for it. They need to know that they do have privileged lives. Okay, a lot of them are benevolent, they give money to charity, etc. But it is hypocritical. I mean, I've been talking about diversity issues. When you get people jetting in private jets to lecture about the environment, dare I say it, Leonardo DiCaprio. The guy's my favorite actor. I think he's a great actor. Sorry, Leo, it's hypocritical to talk about the environment and to lecture the public when you're flying private. It just is. Or at least do those things, do the green issues, but just don't pontificate about it. Because the wider public see this sort of stuff and it doesn't go down well. So, what would actually be refreshing in the Oscars these days is for once, if we have a monologue with the presenters that isn't a lecture disguised as humor, and actors who just receive their award thank the director, thank the producer, give a shout out to their fellow actors, have anecdotes about the family or whatever without a lecture. And if they really, really want to keep lecturing the wider world, then I say, okay, do a Ronald Reagan, get into politics. Free country, stand for Congress, stand for the Senate. So I don't totally reject Hollywood. I don't totally say I hate Hollywood. I would be a hypocrite if I do that. I might go to the cinema tonight and think about seeing 1917, actually. Um, so I still love film. I still love the medium, and I love the idea of the entertainment. The entertainment almost sounds cheap. I love the art of Hollywood. I do. I still think Hollywood produces some great films, and I don't agree with those who say all films. I had a bit of a debate with a contact of mine recently who said, "Oh, it's all sex and violence today. It's just trash that's produced, and the past was great." Well, no, I've seen some rubbish films from the golden era, and I've seen some great films from more contemporary times. That I think every generation has good and bad. I don't think you could dismiss all films today as bad and all films of the past as good, and vice versa. Um, just depends on the director, and there's a lot of things that make a good film. A good screenplay, good chemistry between the leads. There's a lot of things that make a good film, and I certainly wouldn't share the opinion that films went downhill. I still think there's good films out there. I've seen some pretty good films in the last 10 years, but my issue is the trajectory of overriding politics at Hollywood. It's just very distracting. Anyway, I've rambled on for long enough. Let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching.